What's up everyone? In this video, we're going to discuss when to use Tailwind CSS. Before we get started though, make sure you're subscribed to my channel and getting notifications so you never miss when I release a video about Tailwind, Payload CMS, Next.js, and more. Now let's dive in. There's a lot of upside to using Tailwind CSS, but it's not for every project or use case. Yes, it's popular and for good reason. But that doesn't mean you should just go out and start implementing it in your new or existing projects. Let's take a few moments to unpack when you should and shouldn't use Tailwind CSS, starting with when you should. You should use Tailwind CSS if you're on a team without a strong design system. The best ways to keep things consistent between designers is a design system. The next best thing is a strong framework, and Tailwind checks that box. Sizing, spaces, colors, and pseudo-classes are all pre-configured for you, so you and your team can consistently and quickly create without fear of deviating from the system. If you choose to update any part of the Tailwind CSS design system with your own configurations, all uses of that design system will be updated across your project, so you won't need to worry about global updates either. You should use Tailwind CSS if you don't have design resources to quickly prototype websites or applications. Not everyone has a team of designers in their organization, and not everyone has strong design skills in general. Tailwind CSS removes the need for design skills because its utility classes help guide the user to create in a common sense way, which takes out a lot of the guesswork in creating a website or application. Even if you do have a couple designers on your team, there's no guarantee that they have the capacity to help you with your project in a timely manner. If you want to ship quickly, you'll need to be able to do some of the heavy lifting when it comes to design, and Tailwind CSS enables anyone to do that. Of course, if you do have a team of designers, you don't want to ship anything before they see it and have their way with it. But this gets you closer to that final product without waiting on others. You should try Tailwind CSS if you're starting a new project from scratch. It's not easy to incrementally add Tailwind CSS to an existing project, so if you're going to use it, it's best to use it with a new project. This is the best way to build what you want, how you want, without pre-built components getting in the way. Tailwind has guides to get started with many of the modern frameworks in web development, and the path of least resistance with all these guides is to start from scratch. By all means though, if you have the resources to implement Tailwind in an existing project and that's the way you and your team wants to go, then do it. You should use Tailwind CSS if file structure cleanliness is important to you. In the case of React and Next.js, CSS modules can make things look messy very quickly. There are ways to organize this for better project readability and structure, but Tailwind CSS doesn't require a new CSS file for each component. You can just use Tailwind's utility classes in your HTML or TSX files without adding any additional structural complexity to your project. Of course, using a lot of utility classes from Tailwind can result in hard-to-read components and other front-end files if you're not careful. So there are certainly trade-offs here. And on that note, let's move into when you should not use Tailwind CSS. You shouldn't use Tailwind CSS if you have a team with strong CSS skills and an enforced design system. One of the biggest perks of Tailwind CSS is that built-in design system. If you and your team already have a predefined design system and all have strong CSS skills, it wouldn't make sense to use Tailwind CSS outside of prototyping. You can edit parts of Tailwind's config to match your design requirements, but if your design system is already strong and you have other methods of designing your site, you should keep up with those. It's possible to configure Tailwind to match your design system closely, but at some point you're investing more time to working against Tailwind than letting it work for you. You should not use Tailwind if you're a solo dev with deep knowledge of other CSS tools. Unless you're specifically creating a new project just to learn Tailwind, you will likely move faster using technology you already know. If you have deep knowledge of other CSS tools like vanilla CSS or SCSS, then there's no point stumbling through Tailwind's documentation to get to the same end result you would get to if you started with a tool you were familiar with, especially if you're on a deadline. If you don't know Tailwind CSS well, any future gains in efficiency will most likely be lost as you get slowed down learning a new framework on the move and digging through documentation to do something that you already know how to do. There's nothing Tailwind can do that CSS can't do, but there are intricacies to CSS and SCSS that can do more than Tailwind can on its own. You shouldn't use Tailwind if you have a high level of customization for your project. Some things are just better suited for vanilla CSS or other tools like SCSS. If your project requires near pixel-perfect design, extensive visual styling, or any kind of styling that falls outside of Tailwind's utility classes, you might find yourself fighting against the design system rather than letting it work for you. Yes, you can use custom unit values for most utility classes, but at some point you're no longer using Tailwind CSS for its strengths, and you're trying to compensate for its weaknesses. You shouldn't use Tailwind CSS if you have a large project you want to refactor on a tight deadline. It's not easy refactoring an existing site using Tailwind unless you want a complete redesign. Trying to incrementally add Tailwind CSS to a project that has custom CSS may create more headaches than it's worth. There are some long-term future benefits to having Tailwind CSS in a large project, but it would be better to not try to redo what already exists if it's working. So what should you do? Ultimately, it's up to you and how you work. There are benefits to implementing the design system that Tailwind has to offer. There are also benefits to the flexibility and customization that comes from vanilla CSS and SCSS. And there are even benefits to using libraries like Bootstrap to design websites and dashboards. Use what's most comfortable for you or whatever matches your goals. If you want to get a web development job, be sure to look at job descriptions in fields you want to work in and see what tech stacks they require. Don't be afraid to learn a less popular tool if you want to learn it or if you feel like it makes you more competitive in the market. Ultimately, Tailwind is absolutely worth learning and is something I seek to be better at each time I use it. However, as a solo developer, I still prefer using SCSS for most projects. It's easier for me to have the control that comes with using CSS modules, and I can design much faster on the fly than I can with Tailwind CSS. However, Tailwind CSS is a lightweight yet powerful tool that is worth learning when used in the right contexts. Hopefully this video helps you think critically about when you should or shouldn't use Tailwind. If you found this video helpful, please like it and share it with others who might also find it useful. Check to make sure you're subscribed to my channel and getting notifications so you never miss when I release more content about Tailwind, Payload CMS, Next.js, and more. If you have suggestions or questions, please leave those in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. Until then, I'll see you on the next one.